I'm not one of the respondents. Our first respondent is another Dennis, Dr. Dennis Sumara, who is currently the Dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Calgary. He received his BA and his BEd in 1980 from the University of Lethbridge, his MEd in 1990 from the University of Lethbridge, and his PhD in 1994 from the University of Alberta. So he is an Alberta boy.
Getting around.
He has held academic positions, however, outside of our lovely province. I think he started at U of A, but I'm not sure. It could be just a generic list. York University, so yes, he's been to Ontario. Simon Fraser, so he's been to BC. And yes, the University of British Columbia. He has taught undergraduate and graduate courses in language arts education, teacher education, curriculum theory, and qualitative research methods. And as I said, he is currently the Dean at the U of C. I've met him before, and I do look forward to hearing his remarks at this time. Please help me welcome him.
Thanks, Jenny. Hello, everyone. Probably the most important thing to note is I taught grades 7, 8, and 9 for a number of years, so I know where you've been. Live to tell about it. Before coming in here tonight to this room, I did have a couple of conversations with some of you who were teaching all day. And I do appreciate Dennis's reminding all of us who work in universities, that are policymakers, that work in government, that is actually where the rubber hits the road and where we have to give the most of our attention. So I do really appreciate that you took time after a very long day. I want to thank Jenny and her colleagues with the ATA Local for setting up this event. It's important for us to come together as colleagues, especially across institutions, universities, the ATA, the professional organization, your schools, to have conversations. And they're not always easy conversations about teaching and learning, but we need to have them. I appreciate that you're here. I also had a bit of a challenging day. Many of you know that you probably know that we're in year 1 of the implementation of our new teacher education program at the University of Calgary. We spent 2 years working with some people in this room on developing that program. And I'll say a little bit more about this later, but I mention this now because I have spent the entire day in a number of different focus groups with our instructors, with our staff members, with some of our students to find out how we're doing. Right? If you want to know whether your program is working or not, you should probably ask the people who are teaching it. How's it going? That's the question. So we did an online sign up. I said, look, we've got about 5 weeks to get through it. I see some of my colleagues are here. I think I've done about a half dozen of them now. Already we have learned 20 things that we can do next week, and many things that we can do in the next month, and for sure, changes that we're going to make next year. Which, as I was listening to Dennis, where'd he go? Listening to his talk, thinking, okay, I need to fish out a response for this, and it has to be meaningful. I remembered after the day I had and the conversation you've had with us here, one of the most influential articles I read in my teacher education in the 70s, which, by the way, I think was a magical time in some ways in Alberta. Who would have known? We were kind of in between things in the 70s and 80s, where there was a lot of freedom, a lot of degrees of freedom for teachers at that time. Curriculum was a lot smaller, let's put it that way. How many of you remember that? I remember it. And what I also remember is in my teacher education, we were given an article it was Frank Sofka, University of Lethbridge, in our teacher education program by an Albertan, an immigrant to Alberta, Ted Aoki, who started teaching in 1948 at Lethbridge Collegiate Institute in Lethbridge, and eventually did a PhD, I think at UBC actually, I'm not sure where. Doesn't matter. He wrote a wonderful paper that I think all teachers, if you don't get a chance to read, should think about. I don't remember the title, but the message was, there is a relationship, but a difference, between the curriculum as planned and the curriculum as lived. Very important, actually. There is a middle piece that we call the curriculum as learned and the curriculum as assessed. And we give an enormous amount of attention to planning a curriculum. Goodness knows we know about that in Alberta. I appreciate the way we do it. We do it collaboratively, but it's a lot of work planning one. We do put a lot of attention, time, and money into assessing what has been learned, and I'm not an assessment expert, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. But the piece we miss is actually finding out about the curriculum as lived, which is what we do all day in teaching. So when I walk into an undergraduate teacher education class, or into one of your grade A classes, I think I can still do it. I think. Invite me sometime. What we're experiencing is that in-between piece between what is planned and what is assessed, how it affects students, and how we continue to modify and adapt and make adjustments for every learner in that classroom as we're working through that curriculum. There was a period of time where we gave a lot of attention to researching what that meant into classrooms. I think there's been a little bit less of that for a while in Alberta. So I just wanted to remind you that that's where I come from, and I think that piece on the curriculum and live is really what Dennis is talking about and what we're experiencing. Dennis did mention that in terms of international achievement testing, we are known as some of the best in the world. And I've been thinking about that for quite a while. I was on that AZ review team when I was still living in British Columbia, and I came back and met a lot of teachers, went to a number of schools, was very impressed with what's going on here. Wanted to come back to Alberta in large measure because I felt that we could do things here that we couldn't do in those other provinces that were mentioned. And I've taught them, so I believe that we can do things here we can't do elsewhere. Why is that? Well, I think number one, and we need to acknowledge the importance of it, and there is one. I can't quite describe it, but there is an ethos and a mindset that we have in Alberta that is not common across the country. It is different. It's part of our own history. A part of that in the teaching profession comes from our own educational history. So if you remember or if you were paying attention on that day, in your curriculum history class, we learned that in Alberta, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, we had some of the most progressive, interesting education reform in the world. Dennis, you researched some of that. A number of our educational leaders back then studied in Chicago with John Dewey, read things like The Child in the Curriculum, which is exactly what we're talking about today, and that was written in the 20s, about the relationship between the child and the curriculum, and guess who makes that? It's teachers who bring that together. We had a reform movement in the 30s and 40s that was unprecedented anywhere. We're still living out the legacy of that. I do believe that even though we've had many other changes and some noise and interference, especially in the 90s, we still have an embodied sense intergenerationally of what that means. And it is part of where we came from as teachers in Alberta. We also have a tremendous respect for the individual here. And it's not that other provinces don't, but there's something very specific about that that happens in Alberta, in classrooms and in curriculum development. I see it when I go into schools. We have a lot of diversity in the way in which we run schools. I think we may have been the only province in Canada who could have pulled off AZ the way we did. No, it's not perfect. And we did find different things happening. But what impressed me was that we had the idea about, I don't know, a dozen years ago, that if we targeted money and gave it directly to teachers, they would make some good decisions about how to use it to improve student learning. That was the impetus for AZ. It was. And you could get together in your schools with a handful of 2 or 3 other teachers and say, you know what, we've noticed that there's a problem here. And we think if we had a few $1,000s and a little bit of release time and some support and some expertise, we can figure it out. We will figure it out in our school. It may not generalize to the whole world, but we'll figure it out here for these children, in this school, in this community. You know, in the Calgary Board of Education, you're moving towards personalizing learning, and that's what you're already doing. When you're thinking about what's happening with this child or these children in this classroom. So we have a history that I think brings us to a place where we can achieve in that way. And I don't want to fixate on international achievement scores. But one of the things we do know from the research, and it's the one most significant finding from the mega studies of all the mega studies and all the research and education, in the end, we have learned collectively as researchers, there's only one thing that makes a difference, and you all know what it is. If you're a parent or a teacher working in a school, you know that you want to have your child in certain classes. You want your child or your neighbor's children in the classes with the best teachers. And it just so happens that in Alberta, we have most of the best teachers anywhere. Because of our history, because of the kind of training that we've had, educational training, because of the mindset in Alberta, where we actually work in our communities and try to improve things in schools. I'll still never forget in Tabor when I was a young teacher in the early 80s, and we were working on whole language curriculum back then. It was quite interesting, actually, and we were redesigning classrooms and trying to reinvent curriculum, and I said, but we need some furniture, actually, for kids to read in, because those desks aren't going to work, and that's all we had. But we have absolutely no money. This was back in a rural school division where there was very little money for anything. We put the word out to the Parents Association, and 1 week later, I'll never forget it, a bunch of half-ton trucks arrived with old couches and chairs and furniture, and we equipped all the classrooms. And then there was a fundraiser to help us. So there is something about what we can do because we have support in the community. We're very courageous about trying new ideas. We will try them out before we even know they're going to work. The one thing I think we forgot, and we haven't done as well as we used to do, is what I'm trying to do now during our curriculum implementation of our new program at the University of Calgary, which is very exciting. We're very happy with a lot of the things we've planned, but guess what? We're 6 weeks into the first semester and it's not all perfect. I mean, there are issues. And every meeting I have with groups of 8 to 10 people, there's a lot, they say, well, look, here all the great things are happening. We are on the ground doing it. And again, here are some things that we know we can do tomorrow or next week or next month to improve the situation for our students. And guess what? As leaders, we need to act on that. We need to say, yep, and we're going to do what we can to make sure that you can do that. We're going to change what we can. And we're going to admit to our students, look, we're not perfect. We had a plan. This is how it went. You're experiencing a few of the bumps in it. But you're also experiencing the exhilaration of being part of a program that is changing. The final word on this, and I think it does resonate with what I heard from Dennis's message, a couple of things. As educators and teachers, whether we're working in the K through 12 system or in post-secondary, as a group we have great agency. We can do a lot. We've seen a lot happen in Alberta politically over the next couple of years. And in part we've seen that happen because citizens have mobilized. They've raised their voices. They've said, actually, this is what we want, and we want leaders who are going to listen to us. In our own institutions in post-secondary, I need to ask the people on the ground what's happening. We need to ask you and be involved with you with what's happening in the schools because teacher education is a partnership, always. And actually, as teachers, you need to ask your students, how are you experiencing it? What's going on with you? And are there minor changes that we can make in the classroom? And all that knowledge has to come up to the provincial level, to the policy level. We do have a new premier. We do have a great vision for education in Alberta. I really believe in it. I think the inspiring education discussion around Alberta was actually a very inspiring one. A lot of Albertans got involved in that. And it's calling for some radical change in education. I was at a meeting with colleagues, stakeholders from across the province, Parents Association, teachers, principals, university people, with our former minister, and he raised the question, well, what's something that has to change over the next while in order for us to achieve this vision? I'm kind of new here, but not really new, been around. And I said, you know, Mr. Minister, one thing, we have gone too far with building curriculum and assessment. We've gone too far. And I know that I could do what I did in the 70s, in part, because it was a very small, slim curriculum. And when I got it, oh my God, I don't know what to do. It's too small. But you got your colleagues around you, you found out what they had in their classrooms, you had conversations with them, we figured it out. We used our expertise. We got to know who our students were. We did it. And we weren't over-encumbered with too much. We tend to do that in teacher education too, by the way. Oh, wow, they need to know everything. So let's have 100 courses and 1,000,000 things for them to do. Well, we know it doesn't work. We know that what really works is if you pick 2 or 3 key ideas and a few meaningful experiences and go deep and give people a chance to think give them an opportunity to work it out or not to work it out, and to have enough time to pick up some other way of doing it. So again, as Dennis said, none of this is new, by the way. Read the Child in the Curriculum, 1920. It's exactly what Dewey was talking about. One of my favorite quotes from American Idol, or Canadian Idol, actually. One of the contestants was asked, I can't remember the name of this person, but what's your inspiration? And he said to whoever was interviewing, well, it's not Barbara Walters, it's Madonna. And he said, well, Madonna, what advice did Madonna have? In some interview somewhere, who knows where, you can probably find it online, when asked, what is the secret to your success? She said, you know what? I had this vision for the way I'd like things to go, and I realized there'd be a lot of noise around me, and I just blocked it out. I think that's true for all of us too. We have this thing we have to do in front of us. We've got students here teaching. I've got teacher education students we're responsible for. We're all in this together. There's a lot of noise out there. We need to block a lot of it out and focus on what's right in front of us, do the right thing. That's part of being mindful. And actually be really engaged politically. Get involved. You've been great in the CBE when we've had meetings at the University of Calgary. The hallmark moment for me was in 2010, in the spring, during the Winter Olympics, on a very cold, snowy day when there were hockey games on. We still had 100 teachers show up in the evening. Deborah, you were one of them, the administrators, to help us develop our new program. So we know there isn't a problem with teacher engagement in the province. I think we might be having some problems over time with student engagement again because of what we've built out over the last 20 years. That's it. I don't really have a conclusion. It's all I had time to plan for. I want to conclude by saying thank you very much, all of you, on behalf of my colleagues at the University of Calgary Faculty of Education, for helping us develop our program, for being a partner with us in teacher education. That's what it is. It is a partnership. And stay tuned. I'll be calling you up because I need some meetings with you about how we can improve things on the ground as well. Thank you.